I was lying on my bed, finishing up an assignment for my engineering certification course, when my mother appeared in my doorway. It was late evening, 3 days before Thanksgiving, and the hallway light behind her cast her face in shadow. She stood there with her arms crossed, wearing that trademark sneer I had come to know so well over the years. Derek, my younger brother, lingered behind her with a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. My mother's voice was cold and matter-of-fact when she spoke. "You need to move your things to the garage," she said. "Amber needs a real bedroom for the baby." I stared at my laptop screen, processing what she had just told me. The garage, not the spare room downstairs, not Derek's room, which was larger than mine. The garage, where we kept old paint cans, my father's tools, and boxes of holiday decorations nobody had touched in years. I had been living here for 8 months, ever since my father died, helping pay the mortgage while I finished my certification online. I had given up my apartment in Denver, left a solid job, and come back to this small Colorado town because Dad asked me to take care of the family, with his dying breath. "You should be grateful we are letting you stay at all," my mother added, her voice dripping with contempt. Derek shifted his weight behind her, and I caught the satisfied gleam in his eyes. He had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who got away with everything. Now, he was 25, working part-time at a bowling alley when he felt like it, and his girlfriend Amber was pregnant. They had been together for 8 weeks, and she had moved into our house 2 months ago when the pregnancy test came back positive. Neither of them contributed a dime to the household expenses. I closed my laptop slowly. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. "I pay $1,500 a month to live here. I help with the bills. I have been supporting this family since Dad died." My mother's expression did not change. "That money barely covers the utilities." "You are an adult, Easton. Derek is starting a family. He needs the space. Amber needs a proper room with good lighting and a closet for baby things. The garage has electricity and heat. You will be fine." I looked past her to Derek, waiting for him to say something, to object, to show even the smallest shred of decency. But he just stood there with that smug look on his face, enjoying every second of my humiliation. This was the same brother I had taught to ride a bike. The same brother I had helped with homework. The same brother I had defended from bullies in middle school. Now he was watching our mother kick me out of my own bedroom without a word of protest. That night, I packed my essentials into 2 duffel bags and a backpack. I took my clothes, my laptop, my important documents, and the few photos I had of my father. I left behind my furniture, my books, the posters on my walls, everything that had made that room mine for the past 8 months. My mother watched from the hallway as I carried my bags down the stairs, her face impassive. Derek and Amber were in the living room, already planning how they would repaint my room in soft yellow for the nursery. I walked out the front door without saying goodbye. The November air was sharp and cold against my face, and my breath came out in white clouds. I threw my bags into the back seat of my truck and sat behind the wheel for a long moment, staring at the house where I had grown up. The porch light was on, but the windows were dark except for the living room, where I could see Derek and Amber laughing about something. I started the engine and drove away, heading toward Tyler's apartment across town. Tyler had been my best friend since high school. He opened his door at 11:30 that night, took one look at my face, and stepped aside without asking questions. "You can crash on the couch as long as you need," he said. His 1-bedroom apartment was small, but warm, and I was grateful for the kindness. I set my bags down and collapsed onto his worn sofa, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what had just happened. I had given up everything to come back home and take care of my family, and this was how they repaid me. The next morning, I woke up on Tyler's couch with a stiff neck and a hollow feeling in my chest. Tyler was already up, making coffee in his tiny kitchen. He poured me a cup without asking and sat down in the armchair across from me. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. I told him everything, about moving back home after Dad died, about the promise I made at his bedside, about paying rent while Derek contributed nothing, about being kicked out for the garage. Tyler listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "That is messed up, man," he finally said. "Your mom is treating you like garbage." "She always has," I replied. "It just took me this long to admit it." Growing up, Derek had always been the favorite. When he failed classes in high school, Mom blamed the teachers. When I brought home straight A's, She said I was showing off. When Derek wrecked Mom's car at 17, she paid for the repairs and told him everyone makes mistakes. When I dented the bumper backing out of the driveway at 16, she made me pay for it with my summer job money. The pattern was always there, clear as day, but Dad had been the buffer. He had made sure I felt valued. Made sure I knew I mattered. Without him, the house had become toxic. Dad died 8 months ago of a sudden heart attack. He was 52 years old, healthy as far as we knew, working in his garden on a Saturday afternoon when he collapsed. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. I got the call while I was at work in Denver, managing a project for a construction firm. I drove 4 hours straight, speeding the whole way, praying I would get there in time to say goodbye. But he was already gone when I walked into the hospital. The funeral was 3 days later. The church was packed with people who loved him. Dad had been a mechanic, ran his own shop in town for 25 years, and everyone knew him as honest and fair. People told stories about how he had fixed their cars for less than he should have charged, how he had helped families who could not afford repairs, how he had taught half the town's teenagers to change their own oil. I sat in the front pew between my mother and Derek, listening to these stories and feeling like my heart had been carved out of my chest. After the service, at the reception, Mom pulled me aside. "Your father always worried about the house," she said. "The mortgage is not paid off. I am going to need help with the bills. You were always his responsible one. I need you to come home." I had a good job in Denver. I had an apartment I liked, a girlfriend I was getting serious with, a life I had built for myself. But Dad had asked me, right there at the end, to take care of them. His last words to me, whispered through an oxygen mask in the emergency room, were, "Take care of your mother and brother." So I quit my job, broke my lease, ended things with my girlfriend, and moved back into my childhood bedroom. For 8 months, I paid $1,500 a month toward the mortgage and utilities. I picked up part-time work at a local auto shop, using the skills Dad had taught me, and enrolled in an online engineering certification program to finish the degree I had started years ago. I cooked dinners, mowed the lawn, fixed things around the house, did everything I could to keep my promise to Dad, and the whole time, Derek worked maybe 20 hours a week at the bowling alley, spent his money on video games and eating out, and contributed absolutely nothing to the household. Then Amber showed up. She was a waitress Derek had met at some bar, pretty in a high-maintenance way, with long nails and hair extensions and an attitude that said the world owed her something. They had been dating for about a month when she announced she was pregnant. Mom immediately invited her to move in, saying family takes care of family. Within a week, Amber had taken over the spare bathroom, filled the living room with her clothes and makeup, and started treating the house like a hotel. She did not work, did not clean, did not contribute. She just sat on the couch watching reality TV and complaining about morning sickness. Now, sitting in Tyler's apartment with cold coffee in my hands, I realized how completely I had been used. I had given up my entire life to fulfill a deathbed promise, and my mother had taken my sacrifice and thrown it back in my face the moment it became inconvenient. The rage I felt was hot and bitter, but underneath it was something worse. Grief, not just for Dad, but for the family I thought I had, for the mother I had hoped would appreciate me, for the brother I had wanted to be close to. 3 days later, I went back to the house, when I knew everyone would be out. Mom had her standing Tuesday afternoon hair appointment, Derek worked the lunch shift at the bowling alley, and Amber usually went with Mom to get her nails done. I used my key to let myself in, moving quietly even though I knew the house was empty. I needed to get more of my things, and I did not want another confrontation. I headed upstairs to pack another bag, but something made me stop at Dad's old office. It was a small room at the end of the hall that Mom had converted into storage after he died, packing away his desk and files like she could not stand to look at them. Boxes were stacked against the walls, labeled in Mom's neat handwriting. Christmas decorations, old clothes, financial papers. That last box caught my attention. I pulled it down and opened it, not sure what I was looking for, but feeling drawn to it anyway. Inside were manila folders stuffed with documents, bank statements, bills, insurance papers. I started flipping through them, and that is when I saw it. A letter from Mountain States Life Insurance, dated 6 months ago, addressed to my mother. The letter confirmed receipt of a claim payout for $200,000. My hands started shaking. I pulled out the policy documents stapled behind the letter. Dad's life insurance policy, I remembered him talking about it years ago, saying he wanted to make sure we were all taken care of if something happened to him. The beneficiary designation form was right there, and I could see where Dad had filled it in. 50% to spouse, 25% to Easton Clark, 25% to Derek Clark. But the payout letter showed the full $200,000 had gone to Mom alone. There was a second beneficiary form in the folder, dated just 2 months before Dad died. His signature was shaky and unclear, nothing like his usual confident handwriting. This form named Mom as the sole beneficiary. 100%. I sat down hard on the floor, papers scattered around me. $200,000. Mom had received that money 6 months ago, right around the time she started demanding I pay rent and help with bills. She had been crying poverty, making me feel guilty for not contributing enough, all while sitting on a fortune that should have been split among us. $50,000 of that money was supposed to be mine. Another $50,000 should have gone to Derek. Instead, she had kept it all and never said a word. The betrayal cut deeper than anything she had done before. This was not just favoritism or cruel words. This was theft. This was lying about Dad's wishes. This was taking money he had set aside for his sons and hiding it away while demanding I pay to live in my own family home. I took photos of every document with my phone, then carefully packed everything back into the box exactly as I had found it. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. I finished packing my things in a daze, loading 3 more bags into my truck. As I was leaving, I checked the mailbox out of habit. There was a property tax bill addressed to the household, and I opened it without thinking. That is when I saw the second shock of the day. The property owners listed on the bill were Margaret Clark and Easton Clark. My name was on the deed. I owned half the house. I stood there in the driveway, staring at that tax bill, trying to remember when this had happened. Then it came back to me. 2 years ago, Dad had asked me to go with him to the lawyer's office to update some paperwork. He said he wanted to make sure everything was in order, that he was getting older, and wanted to be responsible. I had signed some forms that day, but I had been distracted, worried about a work deadline, not paying close attention to what they were. Dad must have added me to the deed then, probably as part of the same estate planning that created the life insurance policy. My mother knew. She had to know. And she had been collecting $1,500 a month from me in rent, while I was paying to live in a house I half-owned. The full picture was coming together now, and it was uglier than I could have imagined. She had cut me out of the insurance money I was entitled to, stolen my inheritance, and then charged me rent to live in my own property, all while kicking me out to make room for Derek and his girlfriend. I got in my truck and drove back to Tyler's apartment. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out my next move. But one thing was crystal clear. I was done being the family doormat. I was done sacrificing for people who saw me as nothing more than a source of money and labor. Dad had tried to protect me, had put my name on the deed and set aside money for my future. Now it was time to fight for what he had intended me to have. That evening, I drove back to the house. I had spent the afternoon making copies of all the documents I had photographed, organizing my evidence, preparing for the conversation I knew I had to have. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my heart was pounding. I had never confronted my mother like this before. I had always backed down, always tried to keep the peace, always played the role of the good son who did not cause trouble. Not anymore. I walked through the front door without knocking. It was still my house, after all, even if I was not living in it. Mom was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. Derek and Amber were on the couch, watching television, Amber's feet propped up on the coffee table. They all looked up when I entered, surprise and annoyance flashing across their faces. "We need to talk," I said, looking directly at my mother. She dried her hands on a dish towel, her expression already defensive. "If you are here to complain about the garage again, I do not want to hear it." I pulled the folded papers from my jacket pocket and laid them on the kitchen counter. The insurance policy, the payout letter, the property tax bill. I watched her face go pale as she recognized what she was looking at. "You received $200,000 6 months ago," I said, keeping my voice level. "Dad's life insurance. The original beneficiary form said I was supposed to get $50,000. Derek was supposed to get $50,000. You were supposed to get half. But somehow, 2 months before Dad died, the beneficiary got changed, so you got everything. And you never told us." Derek got up from the couch and came into the kitchen. What is he talking about? He asked Mom. She picked up the papers with shaking hands, scanning them quickly. Her face went from pale to red. This is none of your business, she said to me. This money was left to me as your father's widow. I am managing it for the family. The family? I repeated. Is that why you have been charging me $1,500 a month in rent while sitting on $200,000? Is that why you kicked me out of my bedroom to make room for Derek and Amber? You are an adult, she snapped. You should be paying your own way. I am paying my own way, I shot back. I am paying to live in a house I already own half of. I pulled out the property tax bill and held it up. Dad put my name on the deed 2 years ago. I am a co-owner of this property. You have been charging me rent to live in my own house. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek looked between me and Mom, confusion written all over his face. Amber had gotten up from the couch and was standing in the doorway, watching with wide eyes. Mom's mouth opened and closed several times before she found words. That deed was a technicality, she finally said. Your father added your name for estate planning purposes. It does not mean you actually own the house. Actually, it does, I replied. I checked with a real estate attorney this afternoon. I own 50% of this property, which means you have been collecting rent from me illegally, and the insurance money should have been split according to the original beneficiary designation. Dad set that policy up to take care of all of us, not just you. Derek stepped forward. Wait, there was insurance money? How much? $200,000, I told him. You were supposed to get $50,000. I was supposed to get $50,000. Mom got it all instead, and never told either of us. I could see the gears turning in Derek's head, the realization dawning that he had been cheated too. But instead of joining me, he turned defensive. Mom needed that money, he said. She is raising me and Amber and the baby. She deserves to decide how it gets spent. I looked at my younger brother, at the man who had never had to fight for anything in his life, who had never been held accountable, who had always had Mom running interference for him, and I saw that he was never going to change. He was never going to see Mom's favoritism for what it was. He was never going to hold her accountable. Fine, I said. Then I will let the courts decide. Mom slammed her hand down on the counter. You would take your own mother to court? After everything I have done for you? Everything you have done for me, I repeated slowly. You mean like kicking me out of my bedroom? Like charging me rent to live in my own house? Like stealing my inheritance? That money is for the family's future, she said, her voice rising. It is for Derek's baby. Your father would have wanted his grandchild taken care of. Dad wanted all of us taken care of, I said. That is why he set up the policy the way he did. And then you changed it while he was dying in the hospital, too sick to know what he was signing. How dare you? She hissed. Your father trusted me to make decisions for this family. Derek had been quiet, but now he spoke up. What does this mean exactly? About the house? It means I own half of it, I said, which means any major decisions about the property require my consent. And I definitely did not consent to being kicked out or having my room converted into a nursery. Amber finally spoke up from the doorway. The nursery is already planned out, she said, her voice whiny. We measured everything. The crib is going to go on the wall where your bed was. We already picked out paint colors. Soft yellow with white trim. I stared at her. You measured my room for a nursery before I even moved out? She shrugged. Your mom said you would be fine in the garage. We need the space. Something snapped inside me. The sheer entitlement, the complete lack of respect, the way they had all just decided my life and my space and my inheritance did not matter because Derek needed things. I turned back to my mother. I am done, I said. I am done being the family bank. I am done being treated like my needs do not matter. I am done watching Derek get everything handed to him while I work my tail off for scraps. Dad tried to protect me by putting my name on this deed and setting aside money for my future. And you stole it. So yes, Mom, I am taking you to court. I am getting the inheritance I am owed. And I am getting fair compensation for my share of this house. You are being selfish, she said. But her voice had lost some of its confidence. Derek needs that money. The baby needs that money. Derek is 25 years old, I replied. He can get a full-time job like every other adult in America. Amber can get a job. They can be responsible for themselves instead of mooching off money that does not belong to them. I grabbed the documents off the counter and headed for the door. Derek called after me, but I did not stop. I was done arguing. I was done explaining. I was done trying to make them understand why what they had done was wrong. They would never get it because they did not want to get it. They were comfortable in their roles. Comfortable with Mom protecting Derek. Comfortable with me being the responsible one who cleaned up their messes. As I reached my truck, I heard Mom shout from the doorway, "If you do this, you are not welcome in this family anymore." I turned back to look at her, standing on the porch with Derek beside her. "I have not been welcome in this family for a long time," I said. I was just too loyal to Dad's memory to admit it. I drove away for the second time that week, but this time felt different. This time I was not running away. This time I was fighting back. The next week was the hardest of my life. I spent my days working at the auto shop, going through the motions, my mind somewhere else. At night, I crashed on Tyler's couch, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The confrontation with my mother played on repeat in my head. The anger was still there, hot and sharp, but underneath it was grief. Grief for the family I had thought I had. Grief for the mother I had hoped would choose fairness over favoritism. Grief for the brother I had wanted to be close to. I missed my father with an intensity that physically hurt. He would have known what to do. He would have stood up for me. He would have made sure the insurance money was split fairly, that the house situation was handled right, that Derek learned responsibility instead of entitlement. But Dad was gone, and I was on my own, trying to figure out how to fight back against the people who were supposed to love me. My engineering certification exam was 3 weeks away, and I could not focus on studying. Every time I opened my textbooks, my mind wandered back to that insurance policy, that property deed, my mother's face when she realized I had found out the truth. I was behind on assignments, struggling to keep up with the coursework that had seemed manageable a month ago. The exam was crucial for my career, the final step I needed to get back to the kind of job I had left behind in Denver. But I could not make my brain cooperate. Tyler did his best to help. He gave me space when I needed it and dragged me out for pizza when he thought I was spiraling too hard. But even he could not fix this. The betrayal ran too deep, the wounds too fresh. I started thinking about just walking away from everything. The house, the money, the family drama. I could pack up my truck, drive back to Denver, crash with old friends while I looked for work. I could leave this all behind and start over. But every time I got close to making that decision, I thought about Dad, about the promise I had made to him, about the way he had tried to protect me by putting my name on the deed and setting aside money for my future. Walking away would mean letting Mom win. It would mean letting Dad's intentions get trampled. It would mean Derek never learned any consequences for his choices. On Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. Boulder area code. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. Easton? The voice was female, older, familiar. Aunt Susan? Yes, honey. I heard about what happened with your mother. I think we need to talk. Aunt Susan was my father's younger sister. She lived in Boulder, about 2 hours away, and I had not seen her since Dad's funeral. She was a teacher, married with 2 grown kids of her own, and she had always been kind to me when I was growing up. But Mom and Susan did not get along, so family gatherings had been tense and infrequent. How did you find out? I asked. Carol Henderson called me, she said. Carol was an old family friend who lived in our town. She saw you moving boxes out of the house at odd hours and got worried. She did some asking around and heard the rumors. Your mother has been telling people you abandoned the family and stole money. I wanted to hear your side. I told her everything. The whole story. From Dad's death, to the garage eviction, to finding the insurance documents. Susan listened without interrupting, though I could hear her breath catch a few times at the worst parts. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she said, very quietly, I knew your mother was capable of a lot, but this is beyond anything I imagined. You believe me? I asked. It felt important, desperately important, to have someone on my side. Of course I believe you, she said firmly. And I need to tell you something. I was there when your father changed his will and updated his estate plan 2 years ago. He asked me to come along as a witness. He told me exactly why he was doing it. My heart started pounding. What did he say? He said he was worried about your mother's spending habits. He said she had started buying things they did not need. running up credit card bills, and he was concerned about the family's financial future. He said Derek was spoiled and irresponsible, and he needed to make sure you were protected because you were the one who always stepped up. He added you to the deed specifically because he wanted you to have a stake in the family home, something your mother could not take away from you. I closed my eyes, feeling tears sting behind my eyelids. Dad had known. He had seen what I had been too loyal to acknowledge. He had tried to protect me. There is more, Susan continued. Your father talked about the life insurance policy. He said he was splitting it 3 ways because he wanted everyone taken care of, but he especially wanted to make sure you and Derek had something to start your adult lives with. He never intended for your mother to get everything. If that beneficiary form got changed, it happened without his full knowledge or consent. The form was dated 2 months before he died, I said. He was in the hospital for tests. He was on a lot of medication. That sounds like what happened, Susan said, her voice hard. Your mother probably had him sign paperwork when he was not clear-headed. That would be undue influence, possibly even fraud. Can we prove that? I asked. I do not know, she said, but I am willing to testify about what your father told me. And Easton, I want you to come stay with me. I have a guest room. You should not be couch surfing or dealing with this alone. Come to Boulder. We will figure this out together. I felt something loosen in my chest, something I had not realized I was holding tight. Someone believed me. Someone was on my side. Someone wanted to help. I drove to Boulder the next day. Aunt Susan's house was a tidy 2-story in a quiet neighborhood with a garden out front that reminded me painfully of Dad. She greeted me at the door with a hug that lasted a long time, and when she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. You look just like him, she said softly. Same eyes, same stubborn jaw. He would be so proud of you for standing up for yourself. She showed me to the guest room, which was cozy and clean with a comfortable bed and a desk where I could study. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. That evening, over dinner, she told me more about Dad's estate planning. Your father was meticulous, she said. He kept records of everything. When he updated his will and deed, he wrote me a letter explaining his decisions. I still have it. He wanted me to know his intentions in case anything ever got disputed. Does the letter mention the insurance beneficiary? Yes, she said. He specifically states that he is splitting the life insurance 3 ways, and why. That letter could be crucial evidence if we end up in court. We spent the weekend going over documents and timelines. Susan recommended a lawyer in Boulder, a friend of hers who specialized in estate disputes and property law. On Monday morning, I met with him. His name was Richard Moss, a soft-spoken man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for winning difficult cases. I laid out everything for him. The insurance policy, the changed beneficiary form, the property deed, the rent I had been paying, the eviction from my room. Richard took notes, asked clarifying questions, and reviewed every document I had brought. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. You have a strong case, he said. The property issue is clear-cut. You own 50%. Your mother cannot evict you from your own house or charge you rent without your consent. The insurance situation is more complex. But if we can prove your father was not competent when he signed that revised beneficiary form, or that he was unduly influenced, we can challenge it. What do I need to do? I asked. First, we send a formal letter to your mother, he said. We demand an accounting of the insurance money and notify her that you are asserting your property rights. We also inform her that you are ceasing all rent payments effective immediately. That will put her on notice that you are serious. What will she do? Richard smiled grimly. She will probably get angry. She might threaten you. She might hire her own lawyer. But legally, she is in a weak position. You have documentary evidence, witness testimony from your aunt, and clear proof of your father's intentions. If she is smart, she will negotiate. If she is not, we will take her to court and let a judge sort it out. I authorized Richard to send the letter. It went out that afternoon via certified mail. And then I waited. The call came 2 days later. I was in Susan's kitchen, finally managing to focus on my engineering textbooks, when my phone lit up with Mom's number. I let it ring through to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. Then again. On the 4th call, I answered. What? I said. How dare you? She screamed. How dare you send lawyers after me? How dare you try to steal from your own family? I am not stealing anything, I said calmly. I am claiming what is legally mine. That money is mine, she shouted. The house is mine. You have no right to any of it. The deed says otherwise, I replied. And Dad's original insurance designation says otherwise. You are the one who changed things, not me. If you do not drop this right now, I will have you arrested, she threatened. I will tell the police you have been harassing me. Tell them whatever you want, I said. My lawyer has documentation of everything. You are the one who committed fraud, not me. She made a strangled sound of rage and hung up. 10 minutes later, Derek started texting me. Long, rambling messages about family loyalty and how I was destroying the family and making things hard for Amber and the baby. I did not respond. There was nothing to say that would get through to him. That night, Susan got a call from a number she did not recognize. She answered and immediately put it on speaker when she realized it was my mother. Margaret was demanding that Susan stay out of family business, calling her names, threatening to cut off all contact with her. Susan stayed calm. Your brother trusted me with his intentions, Susan said firmly. He wanted Easton protected. I am going to honor his wishes, whether you like it or not. Mom hung up on her too. The next day, Amber posted a long rant on Facebook about deadbeat family members who do not care about babies. She did not name me directly, but the implication was clear. Friends from high school started messaging me, asking if I was okay, if the rumors were true. I ignored most of them. A few I trusted. I gave a brief explanation. Word started getting around town that there was another side to the story. But the real shock came 3 days after Richard sent his letter. He called me into his office with an urgent tone I had not heard before. When I arrived, he had documents spread across his desk, and his expression was grim. We got the financial records from your mother's bank as part of the discovery process, he said. Easton, you need to see this. He turned his computer screen toward me. Bank statements, credit card bills, purchase records. My mother had not just received the insurance money. She had been spending it at an alarming rate. In 6 months, she had burned through nearly $60,000. What did she spend it on? I asked, scrolling through the transactions. Richard pointed out several large purchases. A brand new truck, bought 2 months ago for $32,000. The registration is in Derek's name. $8,000 at a baby furniture store. All in one day. Multiple charges at high-end department stores, designer handbags and clothes, expensive restaurants, a vacation to Las Vegas. She spent $8,000 on baby furniture, I said, staring at the screen. For a baby that is not even here yet. It gets worse, Richard said. He pulled up another document. She has missed 2 mortgage payments. Despite having over $100,000 sitting in her savings account, she has not paid the mortgage. The bank has sent default notices. Why would she do that? I asked. My guess, Richard said, is she is trying to create a financial crisis to justify keeping the insurance money. She wants to be able to say she needed every penny to save the house, but she is not actually using the money to save the house. She is spending it on luxuries while letting the mortgage default. Can she lose the house? If she misses a 3rd payment, the bank will start foreclosure proceedings, he said, which affects you too, since you are a co-owner. We need to act fast. Richard immediately filed a partition action in court, a legal proceeding to force the sale of the property or require my mother to buy out my half at fair market value. He also filed a formal claim against her for my portion of the life insurance money, along with a motion to investigate the circumstances under which the beneficiary form was changed. The legal gears were turning, and there was no going back now. That week was when Susan dropped the bombshell. She called me into her home office, where she had been going through old files. I found something, she said, holding up her phone. Text messages between me and your father from the month before he died. She scrolled through the conversation. Dad had been texting her about his worries, his fears about the family's future. I am concerned about Margaret's spending, he had written. She bought another purse last week for $600. We cannot afford this. Susan had responded with sympathy and suggestions. The conversation continued with Dad expressing frustration about Derek's lack of ambition and gratitude. The boy needs to grow up, but Margaret babies him. I worry what will happen when I am gone. Then there was a text from 2 weeks before his death. I need to protect Easton's inheritance. I am going to make sure the life insurance is divided fairly. Derek and Margaret will be fine, but Easton is the one who will actually use the money responsibly. I need to talk to the lawyer again. My hands shook as I read the words. He had known. Right until the end, he had been trying to protect me. There is more, Susan said quietly. She pulled up her voicemail and played a message. Dad's voice filled the room, familiar and achingly painful to hear. Susan, it's me. I need to update the beneficiary form on my life insurance. Margaret keeps pressuring me to make her the sole beneficiary, says it will be simpler for estate purposes, but I do not trust it. I am going to make sure it stays split 3 ways. Easton deserves his share. Can you be a witness when I go to the insurance office next week? The message was dated 13 days before his heart attack. He had never made it to that insurance office appointment, and sometime during his hospitalization, when he was medicated and confused, Mom had gotten him to sign a form changing everything. This is huge, I said, looking at Susan. This proves his intent. This proves he did not want to change the beneficiary. Richard can use this, Susan agreed. This voicemail and these texts are evidence of your father's state of mind and his wishes. Combined with the suspicious timing of the beneficiary change and the fact that he was hospitalized and medicated, we have a strong case for fraud or undue influence. But Susan had one more revelation, and this one was the most shocking of all. Through our legal discovery process, Richard had subpoenaed medical records related to the insurance claim. What he found changed everything. Amber's pregnancy records showed she was 11 weeks along, but Amber and Derek had only been together for 8 weeks. The math did not add up. Derek is not the father, I said, staring at the dates. No, Richard said. He is not. And if Amber has been using this pregnancy to secure housing and financial support from your family, that is fraud of a different kind entirely. Does Derek know? I asked. I doubt it, Richard said. But he is about to find out. The court hearing for the restraining order was scheduled first, 10 days after Mom filed her false claim. She had alleged that I had threatened her during our confrontation, that I had become aggressive and violent, that she feared for her safety. It was complete fiction, but it had succeeded in embarrassing me. Word got around our small town fast. People I had known my whole life were looking at me differently, wondering if the accusations were true. My boss at the auto shop pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay. Old friends stopped calling. The morning of the hearing, I put on the only suit I owned and drove to the courthouse with Aunt Susan and Richard. My stomach was in knots. Mom was already there with her lawyer, a local attorney named Gary Brennan, who I recognized from television ads. Derek and Amber sat in the gallery behind her. Amber's hand rested on her small baby bump, and I noticed how she touched it constantly, making sure everyone could see she was pregnant. The hearing was in a small courtroom before Judge Patricia Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. Richard had prepared me thoroughly, coaching me on how to answer questions, reminding me to stay calm no matter what accusations were thrown at me. When the judge called the case, we all stood. Mom's lawyer went first, presenting her side of the story. She claimed I had burst into the house unannounced, rifled through private documents, and confronted her aggressively about money. She said I had raised my voice, used threatening language, and made her feel unsafe in her own home. Amber and Derek had provided written statements backing up her version of events. It was a carefully constructed narrative designed to paint me as unstable and dangerous. Then it was our turn. Richard systematically dismantled Mom's story. He presented the property deed, showing that I was a co-owner of the house and had every right to be there. He showed the insurance documents I had found, proving that the confrontation was about real financial malfeasance, not imaginary grievances. He presented my bank statements showing months of rent payments, demonstrating that I had been contributing to the household while being mistreated. Then Aunt Susan took the stand. She was poised and articulate, explaining her relationship to the family and her role as witness to Dad's estate planning. She testified about the conversations she had with Dad before his death, about his clear intentions for the insurance money and the property. She described how Dad had specifically worried about protecting me from Mom's favoritism toward Derek. The judge listened intently, taking notes. When it was my turn to testify, I kept my answers brief and factual. Yes, I had gone to the house to retrieve my belongings. Yes, I had discovered financial documents that concerned me. No, I had never threatened anyone. No, I had never been violent or aggressive. I explained calmly about being evicted from my bedroom, about paying rent to live in my own house, about the insurance money that had been hidden from me. Mom's lawyer tried to trip me up during cross-examination, suggesting I was motivated by greed, that I was lying about the property deed, that I had fabricated evidence. But Richard had prepared me well. I stayed calm, stuck to the facts, and let the documents speak for themselves. When both sides had presented their cases, Judge Morrison did not take long to decide. She looked at my mother with visible disapproval. "Mrs. Clark, this restraining order appears to be retaliatory rather than protective. Your son had legitimate reasons to be at the property he co-owns, and legitimate concerns about financial matters. I see no credible evidence that he threatened or harmed you. The petition is denied." Mom's face went red, but the judge was not finished. "Furthermore, I am troubled by the false statements made in this petition. Filing a baseless restraining order to harass someone is a serious matter. I am ordering you to pay Mr. Easton Clark's legal fees associated with defending against this claim. This hearing is concluded." We walked out of the courthouse into bright autumn sunshine. I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Justice, even this small piece of it, felt good. But I knew this was just the beginning. The parking lot confrontation happened faster than I expected. Mom came storming out of the courthouse, her face twisted with rage. Derek and Amber hurried behind her. She started shouting at me across the parking lot, calling me selfish and ungrateful, saying I had disrespected my father's memory. Derek joined in, his voice loud and aggressive. I stayed calm, standing next to Richard and Susan. I did not respond to the insults. I just waited. And that is when I decided it was time to tell Derek the truth. "Derek," I called out, cutting through his tirade. "How long have you and Amber been together?" He stopped, confused by the question. "What? How long?" I repeated. "When did you two start dating?" "About 2 months," he said, his brow furrowing. "Why? And Amber is how far along in her pregnancy?" 11 weeks, Amber said quickly, her hand going protectively to her stomach. I pulled out my phone and opened the medical records Richard had obtained. "The math does not work," I said. "If you have only been together 8 weeks, Derek, you cannot be the father of an 11-week pregnancy." The silence that followed was absolute. Derek's face went from confused to shocked to angry in the span of seconds. He turned to Amber. "What is he talking about?" "He is lying," Amber said, but her voice had gone shrill. "He is just trying to cause trouble." I held up my phone, showing the medical records. "These are from your obstetrician, Amber, dated from your first appointment. 11 weeks gestation. The dates do not lie." Derek grabbed the phone from my hand and stared at the screen. His face drained of color. "You told me," he said to Amber, his voice breaking. "You told me this was my baby. You said you got pregnant right after we started dating." "I can explain," Amber started, but there was panic in her eyes now. "How can you explain?" Derek shouted. "The dates do not match. If you are 11 weeks pregnant and we have only been together 8 weeks, then whose baby is it?" "It is complicated," Amber said, tears starting to stream down her face. "I was going to tell you." "When?" Derek demanded. "When were you going to tell me I am raising another man's kid?" Mom stepped between them, trying to calm Derek down, but he shook her off. "Did you know?" he asked Mom. "Did you know this was not my baby?" The look on Mom's face told me everything. She had known. Somehow, she had found out and kept it secret. "You knew," Derek said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "You let me think I was going to be a father. You let me plan my whole life around this, and you knew it was a lie." Amber broke then, sobbing openly. "I needed help," she said. "I got pregnant by my ex, and he wanted nothing to do with it. When I met Derek, he was so sweet, and his family was so welcoming. I just needed a place to stay and help with the baby. I did not mean for it to go this far." The raw betrayal on Derek's face was painful to see. Even after everything he had put me through, he had been used, manipulated, lied to, just like I had been. The difference was that his illusions were shattering all at once in a courthouse parking lot with a dozen strangers watching. But the biggest revelation was still to come. In her panic and anger at being exposed, Amber turned on my mother. You do not get to judge me, she screamed at Mom. You knew the baby was not Derek's. You have known for weeks. You found my text messages, and you told me to keep my mouth shut. You said it did not matter whose baby it was because it would keep the insurance money safe and keep Easton from getting any of it. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Mom's face went from red to white in an instant. Derek turned to her slowly, disbelief and rage warring on his face. You knew, he said again. But this time, his voice was different. Cold. Distant. You knew Amber was lying to me. And you used it. You used a fake grandchild to justify stealing Easton's inheritance. That is not what happened, Mom said, but her voice was weak. That is exactly what happened, Derek said. He looked at me. Really looked at me. Maybe for the first time in his life. You were right about everything, he said. About her. About how she treated us. About all of it. Mom tried to salvage the situation, reaching for Derek, but he stepped back. You let me make a fool of myself, he said. You let me plan to be a father. You let me defend you against Easton when he was telling the truth the whole time. Why? Because Derek always comes first, I said quietly. No matter what, no matter who gets hurt, you have always come first. Derek looked between me and Mom, and I could see something breaking inside him. All the years of being coddled, protected, favored, they were crashing down as he realized the price of that treatment. He had been turned into someone he did not respect, someone who was used by the person who claimed to love him most. I am done, Derek said to Mom. I am moving out. I am getting away from you. He walked away without looking back. Amber stood there crying, but nobody comforted her. After a moment, she too walked away, heading toward a friend's car parked at the far end of the lot. Mom stood alone, her face crumpling as she realized what had just happened. She had lost both her sons in the span of 5 minutes. But I felt no satisfaction. Only sadness for what our family could have been if she had just chosen fairness over favoritism. The legal battle intensified over the next 2 weeks. With Derek's testimony now available to us, our case became overwhelming. Richard filed an amended complaint adding Derek's allegations of fraud and manipulation. We had Aunt Susan's text messages and voicemail from Dad. We had the medical records proving Amber's deception. We had bank statements showing Mom's reckless spending. And now we had Derek's sworn statement that Mom had known about Amber's pregnancy fraud and used it to justify keeping the insurance money. Mom hired a better lawyer, someone from Colorado Springs with experience in complex estate disputes. But even he could not overcome the mountain of evidence against her. The court ordered mediation before trial, a last chance for both sides to reach a settlement without going before a jury. The mediation took place in a conference room at Richard's law office. Mom sat on one side of the table with her lawyer. I sat on the other side with Richard and Aunt Susan. A professional mediator, a retired judge named Harold Chen, facilitated the discussion. The atmosphere was tense and hostile from the first moment. Mom's lawyer opened with an offer. Margaret Clark is willing to pay Easton $20,000 in exchange for dropping all claims against her and transferring his share of the property to her sole ownership. Richard did not even blink. That offer is insulting and we reject it. Easton is entitled to $50,000 from the life insurance policy, plus his 50% ownership stake in a house valued at $320,000. His minimum recovery should be $110,000, and that is before we discuss compensation for emotional distress and the rent he paid under false pretenses. The mediation went back and forth for hours. Mom's lawyer tried to argue that the beneficiary change was legitimate, that Dad had made the decision with full capacity. But every time he made that claim, Richard produced another piece of evidence contradicting it. The text messages, the voicemail, Aunt Susan's testimony about Dad's intentions, the suspicious timing during his hospitalization. By early afternoon, Mom's position was crumbling. The mediator took her and her lawyer into a separate room for a private conversation. When they returned 30 minutes later, Mom looked defeated. Mrs. Clark has reconsidered her position, her lawyer said. She is willing to return $50,000 to Easton from the insurance proceeds, representing his rightful share. She is also willing to either purchase his half of the property at appraised value, or agree to sell the property and split the proceeds. Richard looked at me. It was my decision. I thought about it carefully. I did not want the house. It held too many bad memories now. but I wanted to make sure justice was done. I agreed to the insurance payment plus sale of the property, I said. But I have one more condition. Mom has to publicly acknowledge that she was wrong. She has to tell the extended family and the community what really happened. She has been spreading lies about me for months. I want the truth told. Mom's lawyer started to object, but the mediator held up his hand. That is a reasonable request, given the damage to Mr. Clark's reputation. Mrs. Clark, are you willing to make a public statement acknowledging the facts of this case? Mom looked at me across the table, and for the first time, I saw something other than anger in her eyes. Shame, maybe, or regret. I will do it, she said quietly. We drafted the settlement agreement right there. Mom would pay me $50,000 within 30 days. The house would be listed for sale immediately. After the mortgage was paid off and selling costs were deducted, we would split the remaining equity 50-50. Mom would post a statement on social media and send letters to key family members acknowledging that she had wrongly withheld my inheritance and damaged my reputation with false accusations. And both sides would release all claims against each other. I signed the agreement. It was not everything I had wanted. It was not the dramatic courtroom victory I had sometimes fantasized about. But it was fair. It was just. And it was over. The house sold 6 weeks later. The market was good, and we got $330,000 for it. After paying off the remaining mortgage balance of $80,000 and the realtor's commission, there was $220,000 left. Mom and I each got $110,000. The check arrived just before Christmas. I deposited it into my savings account and sat in my truck in the bank parking lot, staring at the receipt. $160,000 total. $50,000 from the insurance, $110,000 from the house sale. It was more money than I had ever had in my life. It was my father's final gift to me, the security and fresh start he had wanted me to have. I used part of it to buy a small house in Boulder, a 2-bedroom bungalow near Aunt Susan's neighborhood. It needed work, but it had good bones and a big backyard. I could see myself building a life there. I paid cash, no mortgage, using $75,000 of my inheritance. The rest I put into savings and investments, knowing I needed to be smart with this gift Dad had given me. I finished my engineering certification 2 weeks after moving into the new house. The exam I had been so worried about turned out to be manageable once I could focus without family drama consuming my thoughts. I passed with a strong score. Within a month, I had job offers from 3 aerospace companies in the Denver-Boulder area. I accepted a position with the best salary and growth potential, starting in January. For the first time in a year, my life felt stable. I had a home I owned, a career that excited me, money in the bank, distance from the toxicity that had been poisoning my life. I was building something real, something that honored the sacrifices Dad had made and the faith he had placed in me. Derek reached out to me in late January. I was surprised to see his name on my phone after months of silence. We met for coffee at a place halfway between Boulder and our hometown. He looked different, thinner, older somehow. The cockiness that had always defined him was gone, replaced by something more grounded. I owe you an apology, he said as soon as we sat down. A real one. For everything. For how I treated you growing up. For ganging up on you with Mom. For not standing up for you when I should have. For being a spoiled, entitled jerk who took advantage of your kindness. I did not know what to say. I had imagined this conversation 100 times, but now that it was happening, the words felt inadequate. I have been going to therapy, Derek continued. Twice a week since everything fell apart, working through a lot of stuff about Mom, about how she raised us, about the dynamic she created between us. My therapist says she pitted us against each other, made me the golden child so I would always need her validation. It messed me up pretty bad. How are you doing? I asked, genuinely wanting to know. Better, he said. I moved to Colorado Springs. Got a full-time job at a warehouse. It is hard work, but honest work. I am sharing an apartment with 2 roommates, actually paying my own bills for the first time in my life. It is humbling. What about Amber? I asked. Gone, he said flatly. She moved back to wherever she came from, right after everything blew up. Last I heard, she had the baby, a girl. The actual father still wants nothing to do with either of them. I feel bad for the kid, growing up with a mom like that. But it is not my problem to solve. We sat in silence for a while, sipping our coffee. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd, people coming and going, living their normal lives, while Derek and I tried to figure out if we could salvage something from the wreckage of our brotherhood. "I do not expect you to forgive me," Derek said. "I do not even know if I forgive myself yet. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see how wrong it all was. How Mom twisted everything. How you were the only one actually trying to hold the family together after Dad died, and we treated you like garbage for it." "I appreciate that," I said. "And I do forgive you, Derek. I do not forget, but I forgive." "That is fair," he said. "That is more than fair." We talked for another hour, slowly rebuilding something that resembled a relationship. It was not the close brotherhood we might have had if things had been different, but it was honest, and that counted for something. "What about Mom?" I finally asked. "Do you talk to her?" "Not really," Derek said. "She calls sometimes, leaves voicemails saying she did her best, that we should understand how hard it was for her as a single mother after Dad died. She does not get it. She still does not see that what she did was wrong. She just thinks we are ungrateful." "Have you seen her?" "Once," he said. "Right after she had to move into her apartment. It was depressing. All her stuff crammed into this tiny rental. She looked old and bitter. She tried to guilt me into moving in with her, helping her with rent. I said no. First time I have ever said no to her about anything important. How did that feel?" "Hard," he admitted. "But necessary. My therapist says I need to set boundaries, that Mom is never going to change unless she faces real consequences for her behavior. So I am trying. It is not easy. I understood that. It had not been easy for me either." Before we left, Derek asked about my new life. I told him about the house, the job, the engineering work I was doing. He listened with what seemed like genuine interest, maybe even pride. "Dad would be proud of you," he said as we walked to our cars. "You are the one who actually became who he wanted us to be. Responsible, independent, someone with integrity. He wanted that for both of us," I said. "It is not too late for you." "I know," Derek said. "I am working on it." We parted with a promise to stay in touch, to meet up again in a few months. I drove back to Boulder feeling lighter. The relationship with Derek would never be what it could have been. But at least it was real now. At least it was based on truth, instead of Mom's manipulations and lies. Spring came to Boulder with an explosion of color, my backyard filled with wildflowers I had not known were planted there. I spent weekends fixing up the house, learning plumbing and electrical work from YouTube videos, taking pride in every small improvement. The work was satisfying in a way my old job had never been. This was mine. My home, my space, my life built on a foundation of honesty and self-respect. My job at the aerospace company turned out to be everything I had hoped for. I was working on satellite communication systems, using my engineering degree and the skills I had developed over years of hands-on work. My boss was impressed with my background, the combination of theoretical knowledge and practical experience. I got a raise after 6 months and a promotion after a year. Aunt Susan became the family I had needed all along. We had dinner together once a week, sometimes at her house, sometimes at mine. She told me stories about Dad when he was young, about the brother she had loved and admired. Those stories helped me feel connected to him in a way I had not since his death. She had kept his memory alive in a way that honored who he really was, not the distorted version Mom tried to create. On the second anniversary of Dad's death, Susan and I drove to his grave. It was a clear day, warm with a gentle breeze. We brought flowers and stood together in silence for a long time. Eventually, I spoke out loud, something I had not done before at his grave. "I kept my promise, Dad. I took care of the family. But I did it in a way that honored what you taught me. You always said to stand up for myself, to never let people walk over me just because they were family. You tried to protect me, and I am grateful. I hope you are proud of the life I am building." Aunt Susan put her hand on my shoulder. "He is proud," she said softly. "I know he is." Derek and I met up every few months. The relationship was still tentative, still healing, but it was progress. He was doing better, working steadily, dating someone new. A woman named Jennifer who worked as a nurse and had her life together. She was good for him, calling out his nonsense while supporting his growth. He seemed happier than I had ever seen him, more at peace with himself. As for Mom, I heard about her occasionally through the small-town grapevine. She was still in her rental apartment, still working her part-time job at the local library. People said she seemed lonely. Some folks felt sorry for her. Others, who had heard the full story, kept their distance. I sent her a card on her birthday each year with a simple message. Thinking of you. Hope you are well. It was not warm, but it was not cruel either. It was all I could manage. I never heard back from her. Not a call, not a text, not a card in return. Part of me was sad about that. Part of me was relieved. She had made her choices. She had chosen favoritism over fairness, manipulation over honesty, her own comfort over her children's well-being. Those choices had consequences. I had not created those consequences. I had simply refused to keep absorbing the damage. 2.5 years after everything fell apart, I met someone. Her name was Caroline, and she was a project manager at a tech company in Denver. We met at a professional networking event, started talking about work, and ended up talking for 3 hours about everything else. She was smart and funny and honest in a way that made me feel safe. When I eventually told her about my family situation, she listened without judgment and then said the most important thing anyone had ever said to me. You were not wrong to fight for yourself. Family does not get to abuse you just because you are related. We took things slow, building a relationship on honesty and mutual respect. She met Aunt Susan, who approved wholeheartedly. She met Derek, who was on his best behavior and told her later that I deserved someone who saw my worth. A year into dating, Caroline moved into my house in Boulder. We talked about marriage, about kids, about the life we wanted to build together. It felt right in a way nothing had felt right in a long time. Looking back now, I can see the arc of it all. The betrayal that forced me to stand up for myself. The fight that taught me my own strength. The loss of the family I thought I had and the discovery of the family I chose. Dad had given me more than money and property. He had given me the tools to protect myself and the example of integrity to live by. The life lesson I learned was painful but necessary. Family is not defined by blood. It is defined by respect, by honesty, by people who choose to build you up instead of tear you down. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones you need protection from. And when that happens, walking away is not abandonment. It is survival. It is self-respect. It is the only choice that allows you to build something real. I kept my promise to Dad, not by staying silent and accepting abuse, not by letting Mom manipulate and steal, but by fighting for the truth, by honoring his wishes, by becoming the man he raised me to be, a man with integrity, a man who stands up for himself, a man who knows his worth, and in the end, that is the greatest gift he could have given me. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who were treating you unfairly? How did you find the courage to set boundaries with people you love? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your own path. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that it is okay to fight for yourself, even against family. Thanks for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there find their own strength. Take care of yourselves. And remember, you deserve respect and honesty from everyone in your life, family included.